Welcome back to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Today, we begin a 3-part series called God Writes New Stories. In this first episode, The Night Everything Changed, I'm going to take you into a moment that altered the direction of my life, not because something dramatic happened on the outside, but because something finally shifted on the inside. This is a story about honesty, about masks, about pressure, about the fear of being found out, and the freedom that comes when you finally stop running. So settle in, take a breath. This may be the episode that God uses to help you begin a new chapter. Let's dive in. See, I grew up as a pastor's kid, which for better or for worse meant that the church wasn't just a building for me. It was a lifestyle, a culture, a rhythm, almost a second home. Some people grew up learning how to ride a bike or throw a baseball. And while I learned those things too, I also learned how to do things like greet people at the door and act like everything was fine, even if it wasn't. Some people grew up learning how to do things like riding a bike or throwing a baseball. Now, don't get me wrong, I learned all those things too. But I also learned some church skills, how to do things like greet people at the door and how to act like everything was fine, even if I wasn't sure that it was. There's a unique kind of pressure that comes with being a pastor's kid, not because anyone intends to put it on you, but because you absorb it. And sometimes you just put it on yourself. You feel it in the atmosphere. Before you realize it, you learn things like always smile, don't draw negative attention, be mature, set an example, don't be the reasons that your parents get called into a meeting. You become the kid who knows better. You become the kid who's expected to serve. You become the kid who's fine, even when maybe you're not. And somewhere in that environment, you learn how to look put together, even when your inner world is really messy. I learned the language of faith before I learned how to practice honesty. I learned how to be dependable before I learned how to be vulnerable. And because of that, I carried this early belief that it's safer to look okay than it actually is to be okay. Maybe you relate to that. Maybe you grew up in a Christian home where everything was messy, but it was dealt with privately and quietly. Maybe you grew up in a family where strength meant silence. Maybe you grew up in a church where everyone looked great on the outside, but you knew deep down that people were hurting. Or maybe you learned at some point in your life that vulnerability comes with risk, and masks come with applause. Now fast forward to my adult years, and the pattern followed me. I was still serving God while secretly struggling. I served in the church faithfully. I served creatively, dependably. I volunteered. I worked behind the scenes. I helped lead ministries. I helped start ministries. I took on responsibilities because I loved God and I loved his people. But behind all of that, behind the Sunday morning smile, behind the leadership responsibilities, behind the encouraging words I gave people, there were parts of my heart that I didn't want anyone to see. I'm guessing that you have your own version of that story. Maybe for you it wasn't a habit. Maybe it was a fear, anxiety, depression, anger, loneliness, insecurity, codependency, perfectionism, or maybe just a voice in your head that constantly said, "You're not enough. Have I hit it yet?" Maybe you're leading a small group while quietly battling panic attacks. Maybe you were raising your kids while feeling like a failure every night. Maybe you were serving in church while silently dealing with trauma that had never healed. Maybe you were the strong friend, but never the safe friend. Whatever your struggle was or is, the feeling is the same. If they knew the real me, they'd never see me the same. And so you push harder. You have a bigger smile. You serve more. You pray more. You perform better. But behind closed doors, you collapse. Not because you don't God, not because you don't love God, but because you're simply exhausted from hiding. That was me. Before the night everything changed, I had already been living with a secret for years, and I had convinced myself that I can handle this. I can fix it on my own. I just need more discipline. I just need to try harder. I just need to be stronger. But the problem with that mindset is that it doesn't work. One of the heaviest forms of exhaustion isn't physical, it's spiritual and emotional exhaustion from pretending that everything is okay. And if I'm being honest, ministry can make that even harder. Because when you're blessed with the responsibility of serving others, especially if you're gifted at it, you start believing the lie that says God can use me outwardly, but he can't handle what I'm dealing with inwardly. So you keep the mask on. You keep smiling. You keep the "I'm good" answers flowing. You keep juggling everything in silence because you're terrified of what would happen if you dropped even one ball. But masks are heavy, and secrets are heavier, and eventually something will give. I remember the night I first walked into a Celebrate Recovery meeting. I didn't want to enter that room. If you've ever approached a room looking around, knowing that you're about to be honest for the first time, you know the feeling. It's a combination of dread, hope, fear, and relief, all fighting for space in your chest. I remember pulling into the parking lot thinking, no one can see me here. I hope nobody recognizes me. Do I really need this? I can still turn around. I can do this on my own. I don't need to go in there. But something inside of me knew that I couldn't keep doing life the same way that I had been doing it. So I walked in. People smiled at me, they greeted me, and I didn't know whether to smile back or run out. I found a seat in the back of the room, trying to blend in, be invisible as much as I could. The lights felt like they were really bright. The room felt like it was smaller than usual. My heartbeat felt way too loud. My hands were shaking and sweaty, and I was just sitting there thinking, okay, I'm going to sit here, and then I can leave at the end and say that I tried it and it wasn't for me. And all the while, I'm sitting there thinking of safe versions that I can say of why I was there. I can say things like, I'm struggling with some things, or I have a few issues I'm working through, or I'm dealing with some stress. They all were true in some way, shape, or form, but they weren't the truth. But then I got asked a question why I was there, and I gave one of the safe answers. And then the leader looked at me, not harshly, not suspiciously, just kindly, gently, and asked, is there anything else? And that question hit me like a hammer. It wasn't judgment. It wasn't accusation. It was an invitation. And invitations have power. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I tried to push the words down. I tried to maintain composure. But something inside of me, something that I had buried for years, refused to stay silent anymore. And I began to weep. And for the first time in my life, I said the real struggle out loud. Not the polished version, not the acceptable church struggle, the real one, the one I had been burying. In that moment, the words came out of my mouth and I broke. Completely, fully. No more pretense, no strength, no more mask. I was crying in front of somebody that I hardly knew. I was crying in front of another person and I couldn't stop. But hear me, those tears weren't weakness. They were finally release. The breakdown wasn't failure, it was freedom. The moment wasn't shame, it was healing. Because for the first time, the weight that I had been carrying alone for so many years was no longer mine to carry alone. This is the part that shocked me, though. For years, I had been listening to the enemy saying what would happen to me. I expected the people to recoil. I expected awkwardness. I expected judgment. I expected looks of disgust. I expected to be asked to leave the church. But instead, I felt compassion. I heard things like, thank you for sharing. You're safe here. You're not alone. You are brave for admitting that. And the strangest thing happened. The people, like I said, they weren't surprised by my struggle. They were encouraged by my honesty. And it was then that I realized something that felt both terrifying and liberating. The things that we hide the most are often the things that others resonate with the most. My honesty didn't drive the people away, it pulled them closer. I had spent years convinced that God was disappointed in me, that he was embarrassed by me, that he was frustrated by my weakness, and that he was just waiting for me to finally get it together. But that night showed me the truth. God isn't attracted to our strength, he's drawn to our surrender. He's not looking for perfection, he's looking for honesty. He doesn't heal what we hide. He heals what we're not. He heals what we're willing to reveal. The story of the prodigal son suddenly made sense to me in a way that I had never thought of. The father in the story didn't wait for the son to clean himself up. He didn't wait for him to say the right prayer. He didn't wait for the proof of sincerity. The father saw his son returning home and he ran to him. He embraced him like nothing else. He embraced him like nothing else. He embraced him while he was still a long way off. And that is the God that I know. That is the God who met me that night. That is the God that met me as I was returning home and admitting my struggles. And that's the same God who wants to meet you. So let me turn this towards you for a moment. What have you been carrying alone? A habit, a fear, a shame, a wound, a memory, a mistake, an insecurity, or maybe a secret struggle? Maybe you're serving God while quietly falling apart. Maybe you're leading others while feeling unworthy yourself. Maybe you're the strong one who's really tired of being strong. Maybe you're terrified of what would happen if people knew the real you. If that's you, please hear this. God already knows the real you, and he still chooses you. He still chooses you. He's not surprised. He's not disgusted, and he's not even disappointed. He's waiting. He's waiting for the moment that you decide to stop hiding, waiting for the moment that you let down the facade, waiting for the moment that you stop trying to fight alone, for the moment that you say, I need help, because that moment of honesty might become the night everything changes for you too. So this week I want to invite you to do something brave, not drastic, not dramatic, just brave. Tell the truth to God and to one safe person. It could be a friend, a pastor, a counselor, maybe somebody in your small group, or maybe somebody in your recovery community. And if you're not in a recovery community, I would encourage you to find one. Celebrate Recovery is an awesome ministry. Highly recommend it with everything that I am. You can go to crlocator.com, crlocator.com, plug in your zip code, and it will tell you the closest meeting. But tell the truth, because honesty is the crack in the mask that lets the light in. Thanks for joining me for part 1 of God Writes New Stories. If this episode spoke to you, if it stirred something inside of you, would you share it with somebody who might need the courage to be honest too? For more information on me, having me speak at your church or events, or for more encouragement, visit wesleyfarnsworth.com and join me next week for part 2. Rock bottom is holy ground. Until then, remember that God can't heal who you pretend to be, but he can transform who you truly are. God bless you.